Hey, Mike, did you see that story about Boeing's new invisible plane?
You know, I did, but I just can't see them taking off. All right, maybe Phil has some ideas on that next. Have you ever dreamed about becoming a pilot? Make that dream come true at San Diego Flight Training International. We are excited to welcome San Diego Flight Training International as our sponsor. Learn to fly, start the adventure of a lifetime in the heart of San Diego, right at Montgomery Field. Getting started is easy. Give them a call at 858-569-1822. Learn to fly with SDFTI. Call today, 858-569-1822. And from San Diego Flight Training International, we have Phil Thalheimer. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for being a sponsor. Very much appreciate you supporting the show. So tell us a little bit about your school.
Well, we opened up in 1989, and we've had the same management and same mission from the beginning. We do only one thing. We train people to fly. We take them from zero time on to all the way up to the airlines.
Oh, wow.
And everything in between.
So somebody walks off the street, says, "Hey, I want to learn how to fly." They can work them way up from a Cessna to a 747.
Well, we can't. We basically take them to the point where they go to the airlines, and the airlines train them where they want to go.
Yeah.
So I describe it as we handle basically K through 12 education, and then when you get to college, you pick your major.
What is the most misunderstood thing? What do you want people to know that they probably have wrong about learning to fly?
I think the most misunderstood thing is they believe it's really so difficult, and you have to have perfect physical, perfect eyes, perfect this, that, and the other. I mean, I always harken back to a guy walked in a number of years ago who was a navigator on a B-17, so you can get his age. I mean, he was in the late 80s, and he always wanted to fly. And I told him, go out and get your Federal Aviation Medical, and we'll teach you how to fly. And we did. He got his license. I don't think he ever flew by himself, but he wanted to be in the front of the plane. And so, and we've taught people as young as 14, 15, all the way up to somebody in the middle 80s.
Wow. And now, which was more helpful to the industry, Pink Floyd's learning to fly or Tom Petty's learning to fly? I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm kind of a country guy, so I'll go with Tom Petty.
All right, fair enough. How did you get into flying, Phil?
You know, I've always been that kind of person. I'm sure you know about it. Who the kid who was at the airport, stood at the fence, looked at the sky. I say people have a kind of a flying gene. They may not become pilots, but nobody who doesn't have that gene ever gets in an airplane. It's just something about it that's almost existential.
Wow. Where did you grew up back east, right?
I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and there were planes going over my house all the time, including we were not too far from a Naval Air Station where where the P-3s went out to chase Russian submarines.
Yeah, P-3 Orion, right?
P-3 Orion.
So what was your progression? How did you take lessons as a kid, or?
No, I came out to California to go to graduate school, and I was in a PhD program, and I always had found reasons not to learn to fly, and finally I said, I'm going to do this. I need to get my head out of a library and into a classroom. And what I learned was that the thing about aviation and flying is you need to focus on it. You need to focus on what you're doing. It's not inherently dangerous. It's not inherently difficult, but it doesn't treat people who are arrogant or are kind of not focused very well.
Hey, to talk about that, like, what do you mean? Like, what if I'm arrogant and I'm flying a plane? What works against me?
You got to be very,
because when I think of pilots, you know what I mean? Isn't that kind of the stereotype?
Yeah, it is. It is but it is the stereotype of kind of the fighter pilot. But I'll say that's why they only put one seat in a fighter pilot. And that's why they're there. And they're phenomenal aviators, but not necessarily great teachers of aviation. What I mean by that is you have to understand the limits of what your limits and the limits of your equipment, and you really need to stay ahead of the airplane, stay focused on what you're doing. There's no place to pull over. The CHP isn't going to come and bail you out. It's things like that. You better know how much fuel you have on the plane. You better know how to use the radio, and we teach that. I mean, that's why you could walk into a place in La Jolla or someplace and walk out with a Maserati if you had the money from the dealership there.
Right.
I don't care if you're Bill Gates. If you and buy a $30,000, Cub, you're not going to be able to fly it until you put 40 to 50 hours into it, and that's really the difference.
Wow. So, just backing up, you said you were going through a PhD program. Do you have your PhD?
I have a master's degree.
You have a master's degree, and what?
Industrial and organizational psychology.
Wow. So is this what you applied it to, or do you have? Is this a side hustle, or
no? This is all I've been doing since 2000.
Wow.
Full time. But before that, I was basically senior management at the city of San Diego, and I was also the chief information officer for the city of San Diego.
Oh, interesting. Because that's probably I don't know. A lot of people don't know, but you actually ran for office.
I did. I realized that I could do a better job, and I guess the population in San Diego disagreed.
Well, but the pilot industry benefited.
I hope so. We've trained thousands over the years.
I think another misunderstanding about being a pilot is I think a lot of people think that unless you join the military, that's it. There's no way to do it. And I think that's completely false.
That is completely false. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about 6 or 7 years ago, and it talked that very issue. It talked about that during World War II, they would send thousands of airplanes to a target. By Korea, they were down to about 40 to 45 aircraft per target. By the first Iraq War, they were down to 4 aircraft per target. But the technology got so good that now they're down to 1 aircraft to 4 targets. So if you figure that out, you just don't need the pilots. And the military is not producing them and hasn't been for a long time. You really have most of the people that are flying the airplanes today are actually folks that came out of the civilian world. Almost exclusively.
And my understanding, the weather's so good in San Diego that it's one of the best places in the nation to train, right? Because you guys have so many days of sunshine.
Yeah, it's one of the best places in the world to train because we have that. We fly maybe 355, 360 days a year. But more than that, we have such variable terrain. You've got issues of the ocean. You've got the mountains, and what you've also got is an international border, and we've got major civilian aviation right by and major military aviation. So I would put our students up against anybody in the country. They've had more experience than people with thousands of hours coming from, let's say, Kansas or Nebraska.
Do you get international students?
We are, and primarily. We're 60, 70% international.
You know, I had a buddy of mine's an instructor. He actually flies like a private jet for like a group of doctors or something, and then he's also an instructor. And he told me this story. He's over in Arizona, and he said, yeah, they send a lot of people from South Korea.
Yes,
a lot of folks come over from South Korea to learn how to fly. And he's telling me, I'm going to way oversimplify this, so if you're listening and you know better than I, but basically he said that a lot of the careers, or they just kind of assign you a career, like, hey, you're a this, you're a that, or maybe just give you kind of a broad, field, and you're kind of limited in what you can and can't do. And so a lot of the pilots that he sees from South Korea were kind of assigned, this as a job, like, hey, you're going to go be a pilot. And they weren't that excited about it. And he couldn't understand that. He's up in the air. He was, had a student, and they were up in the air, and he's looking around, and he goes, man, this is amazing, isn't it? And he looks over, and the guy's just kind of like, whatever. And it was almost like he was learning how to like drive a bus, And the reason I thought of that is that whole, you were just saying there's this pilot gene, that like, hey, you either love it or whatever. But I was amazed by that. So tell me about the international students you guys get.
We get a lot of students out of Korea actually right now, South Korea. We're also getting a lot of students out in India, and it ranges. Some of them are from very wealthy families, and the kids are just being sent. But others are pretty serious. But going back to what you said about the joy of it, I tell people all the time, you've been on an airliner, you remember the last 5 minutes of the flight where you can see the ground and see going in, or flying into San Diego, you see Balboa Park. Well, we live there. That's the 8 to 10 to 12,000 foot world. That's our world. You see that all the time with my students. It's magnificent. It is just absolutely magnificent to do.
Do you have do you have a typical pilot?
No, although I've got some, we've got 2 types groups. We have basically the ones that want professional aviation and the other ones who hate the TSA. And they just want to basically be able to fly themselves.
Oh, I see. Okay. So let's say, are there levels, or you're a pilot, you're a pilot?
No, there are levels. There's as for example, I'm not a commercial pilot. That's a separate license. I have what's called a private pilot's license, which allows me to fly with passengers anywhere in the United States. I'm also instrument rated, which means I can fly in bad weather. But I can't fly for hire. So the next level would be the commercial pilot, and that would be anybody from a fish spotter to a certified flight instructor to driving you're like your friend doing the commercial jet.
Right.
And beyond that are the airline pilots, and it's the next level. It's called an airline transport pilot, or you'll hear it as ATP, and that's the people who are actually flying, for United or whoever.
And okay, so once you get your license, you're a pilot. What do you do? Can you just say, hey, I'm going to rent a plane this weekend? And
you can, and that's exactly right. And the only thing is the school or the place will ask you to prove that you can actually fly the darn thing, and so they'll take you up on what's called a check flight with one of their instructors, and they'll give you authorization to rent their aircraft, and then you can maintain your qualifications and your current what's called currency technically pretty easily after that.
So you don't have to own a plane to be a pilot?
No, most people do not.
Most people do not. I would imagine. I don't know. How much is a plane? Like if you're going to buy a Cessna, what do you?
It depends how many people you want to and how fast you want to get there. So
is there
a new Cessna 172, which is a 4-seater today, you're looking at about $700K.
$700,000?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
now, a used one for, let's say, which would have decent radios and stuff from, let's say, 2000 to 2005, has about, let's say, been flying for about 1,000 or 1,500 hours. You're still looking at well over $200,000.
Wow, I didn't realize. When I was a kid, my old man was a pilot in college, so that would have been like I should know this. Like the early 60s, maybe late 50s, probably late 50s. He was a pilot going in college, and then he had a whole career that had nothing to do with being a pilot. He never touched a yoke again,
right?
And then retired, and in the late 2000s, almost like 2010, something like that, and then went back and got his license.
Yeah.
So he got me when I was 14. He got me a ride in a Cessna 172 out of Florida, and it was so fun. It was so much fun. All right, PRMI Mortgage, primeres.com/alpine. Are you in the military looking for help for a VA loan? If you are looking to buy or refi, or if you're considering a reverse mortgage, call our local mortgage guy that you can trust. Call Chris Wiley at PRMI Mortgage. For nearly 25 years, Chris has been helping local San Diegans with all of their mortgage needs. Call Chris Wiley at 619-722-1303 or primeres.com/alpine. I'm not making fun of Dave anymore about reading these. It's harder than it looks. I mean, it's fun making fun of Dave when he trips over it, but it's actually kind of hard. Anyway, I hope you're doing great, Dave. So we're talking to Phil Thalheimer about San Diego Flight Training International, San Diego Flight Training International, where they're going to teach you how to fly. So we were just talking about, okay, you get your license, then you can actually fly. You can go down and rent a plane. How does that work? Like, talk about the prices.
Okay, there are flying clubs almost all over. There's some in San Diego. The pricing about renting an airplane is a little different than a car because you only pay for when the engine's on, and they include fuel. So, for example, like one of my aircraft, if we don't rent them, but if they would rent them, they would rent for about $150 to $160 an hour with fuel. But to give you an idea of what that is, that plane flies at 145 to 150 miles an hour. So that you're looking at getting to, let's say, Vegas in an hour and a half, and it'll carry 4 adults, and then you can bring them back. It's actually pretty cost effective.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what if I want to go to Vegas for 4 days? Do I you know what I mean? Like, does the plane
the plane would sit, and the different clubs have different rules. But like, for example, one club I know in San Diego, you have to fly the airplane, or you'll be billed for 1 hour a day. So if it's 4 days, would be 4 hours. Well, the flight in and out of Vegas is going to take 3 to 3.5. So you're right there, and you've had the airplane for 4 days.
Interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I didn't realize. I mean, that seems
and
pretty
it includes
easy.
all the fuel.
It seems really, really easy. Now, there's something. What is it? There's something like there's something called. It's like a $200 hamburger.
Oh, that's the story of going to Catalina. And so, because it was, it's roughly a 45, 50-minute flight, depending on what you're flying. So and that's the $200 hamburger. Because you've spent that getting in and out of Catalina to get your Buffalo burger.
Okay, so you want to go flying? You decide to go to Catalina. That's your trip. So you fly over.
It's a beautiful flight out there. I've done it many times, and it has people have said to me, I have no idea, but it's the closest thing for a civilian to like landing on an aircraft carrier, because the runway comes out of nowhere and then ends out of nowhere. So it just disappears. And if you don't know what you're doing, there have been some accidents, sadly, where people thought they didn't have enough runway left. They couldn't see it, and they rolled right off the end.
Jeez. Into what?
A ravine.
Oh, that's the worst place you want to run into.
It's a bad day. It's a really bad day.
I think a ravine is only second to a mountain, I think.
Yeah.
Either way, you don't want to run into either of those.
Right.
What do you see, like when you're flying over the ocean like that? Do you see? Can you look down and see sharks and whales?
I think in all my flying over an ocean, I think I've seen a whale for real once.
What's like the most memorable flight? What's a flight where that you just think like, oh man?
I used to do this by myself, and I'll state up front. I don't have I can't fly by myself. I lost what the required medical. I still have a license, but I can't fly what they call pilot in command anymore. And many years ago, when I was single, I would take an airplane up early on a Saturday morning, right up the coast here, and I would basically put the bottom of the airplane in a cloud and keep the top of it out of a cloud. It is patently illegal, and I'll say to do that. But I had a blast. It was such a transcendental experience to see the wings cut the cloud like that. And above me was clear, bright sunshine, and below me was the cloud. Unfortunately, it was long enough ago that any kind of statute of limitations long expired.
There you go. In case anyone's listening.
In case anybody from the FAA is listening.
The FAA. What's the relationship? There seems to be a relationship between pilots and firearms. Is that fair to say?
Most of the people that I've been around, and in my school and other places, they all are very pro Second Amendment.
Yeah, and I think it's my theory. I'm going to see what you think, but my theory is that the type of person who's flying an airplane is the type of person that's probably fairly self-reliant. And that goes hand in hand with having the most effective self-defense tool known to man, which is a firearm. It seems like it's the same person, the same woman, the same guy.
There's a very much of a survival, of an independence, of being free. You want to choose where you go. You want to fly when you want to go. There's that part, and there's also it takes skills, and it both takes skills. So people want to learn to be good at this. And there both is at least a belief there's a relative edge of danger. So you really don't want to take this lightly. Everything in aviation, as well as in my experience with firearms, is you want to take the best training you can, and you want to be as safe as possible.
Is a firearm kind of standard equipment when you're going flying, or not really?
No,
not really.
Not that I'm aware of.
Is there a fire? Is it the AR-7 was actually created for pilots? Is that right?
I don't think so. I think the Israelis used it with their in the 80s with their Air Force for a while. I don't think it was created necessarily for pilots. I think it was created for a survivalist because it's small and fairly accurate.
Yeah. You can back it all into the into the stock.
It's all about weight and space in a cockpit.
It's interesting. You ever been to the? I'm going to ask you this. Of course, you've been to Oshkosh. Have you been to Oshkosh?
Once.
Just once?
Once.
Okay, now I'm actually surprised. Do you remember what year?
Oh my goodness! It would have been maybe 90.
90? I went in. Was it 90? I might have been there in 90. It might have been 89, 90. My dad took me, and
I feel the same way about Oshkosh that I feel about, frankly, basically Miramar, the air show. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
Not that exciting.
Not that.
I get you.
I live around airplanes. That's not where I want to spend my social time.
Well, that's where I learned in Oshkosh was where I walked through a C-5 Galaxy, which was at the time the biggest airplane in the world. And the guy, I don't know.
The Wright brothers' flight could take place inside the C-5.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I learned is that the Wright brothers' first flight was shorter
and
cargo.
Lower than the cargo space.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And then I saw a jump jet too. That was cool. It must have been like 88, 88, 89, something like that. But man, I was a teenager. I was with my old man. It was fun. Oh,
it's a flying building. The plane's enormous. And then I don't know if you got down to, I guess it was Brown Field when that big Russian transport. I don't know, the Antov something with the what is it, 8 engines and 40 tires or something. I mean, that's even bigger than the C5s, closer to C7. It's like the C-17 size. These planes are just flying buildings. It's just, they're enormous.
That was in San Diego at one point?
Yeah.
What were they doing?
Air show.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense. All right. So if I want to learn how to fly, what am I putting aside? What do I got to stuff the piggy bank with?
To basically get your private pilot license, which would allow you to fly in good visible weather with passengers, you're looking about $11,000. I tell people plus or minus 10%, depending on your skill set. And you're looking at about 50 to 55 hours of actual time in the cockpit with about 25 to 30 of ground instruction.
Okay, so that's a little pricey. That's not, I don't have that in my pocket, but
we
it's
wouldn't
not
expect
that bad.
you to. We wouldn't expect you to. Very few people pay it up front. We have lots of students who basically what I call pay by the drink. They put $1,000 on the account, they fly it off. They put another $1,000 on the account, and they fly it off.
But that's not that bad. 11,000 to get to your. I mean, I think most of our listeners probably have a firearms collection that's about that.
Well, and also most of the people I talk to who don't know anything about aviation, if you ask that question, they're going to say, $30,000, $40,000 to get their private pilot's license.
I would have said that. If you'd have asked me before, I would have said $30,000, $40,000.
I mean, you can do that, but you're gonna be flying basically, a $500,000, $1 million aircraft. That's not what you do at this level. And for that kind of money, actually, for $50,000 to $60,000, we can take you all the way to the point where you're ready for the airlines.
Now, I don't know what to call it. It's not a sport. It's not a hobby. What is it? The industry, the activity.
For some people, it's a hobby. For other people, it's a profession.
Are you guys trying to expand? Are you hurting for people to like, hey, we really need to expand this, or are you guys inundated?
You mean San Diego flight training?
Yeah. Well,
no. After COVID, we right now have a lot of available assets. I mean, we're getting better. We've come out of it, but COVID was really tough because, particularly at my school, we're an international flight school, hence the name, and so we were struck by it much earlier. We got most of our students from Southeast Asia, so the United States started shutting down around March of 2020, I guess it was.
Yeah.
We were started seeing the embassies closed around the world around Thanksgiving of 2019. And when the embassies closed, we were in real trouble.
I'm glad you guys navigated it.
Yeah. We were lucky. We had a lot of cash on hand. We don't anymore, but we didn't lay anybody off, and we paid every bill.
That's awesome. Congratulations. But the point is, no one's waiting in line. If you call Phil up and say, hey, I want to learn, boom.
We literally could start people the same day.
Wow. What would you learn the same day?
You get your first flight, introduction to the aviation. We'd probably put you in a simulator. We may even put you in an airplane if we don't have a scheduling conflict.
I don't know if I've been thinking about this for so long, Phil. Should I do this?
Absolutely.
What do you guys do? Helicopters too?
No, we're purely fixed wing. But there's a very good helicopter school in the field. I love the guys. They're called corporate. They deserve your business.
I have zero interest in a helicopter. That looks terrifying. Do helicopters make you nervous at all?
I've never been in one, to be honest.
Yeah. And that's the other thing about flying. Doesn't feel like heights.
No.
If you're afraid of heights, you can fly.
I get that a lot. You can fly. I tell people about the safety issue, and I say, if car accidents were as uncommon as aviation accidents, you'd hear about them all the time. You just don't. The reason you hear about aviation accidents on the news is because they're so uncommon.
Interesting. So you're safer than driving a car?
Yes, I think you are. In many ways. Statistically, much safer than driving a car.
What do you think the future of aviation is? Is it growing?
I think it is growing. I think the future of aviation is going to be automation, and there's a push for, and I don't know how they're going to get there, but to electrify the airplanes. I mean, there's a big push now to use batteries and solar. The problem is weight. The issue is, and so until they deal with the weight of either solar panels or batteries, I don't see it happening.
It also feels like, I mean, it's 2022. We were promised flying cars, back in the 80s, right? Kelly's nodding her head over there. Yeah. I feel like we're getting closer and closer to that, conceptually.
Yep, we are. There was an article about it this week. They're coming out.
There you go. Look at that. It's almost like I read. Thanks for watching this clip from Gun Owners Radio. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.